The moment I saw the mail on the kitchen counter, I knew something had shifted. It wasn't the electric bill. I'd seen plenty of those. It was the way my daughter-in-law had left it there, face down, like she was hoping I wouldn't notice. Like she'd already decided it wasn't my concern. I picked it up anyway. I always do. My name was on it. Eleanor Marsh. That's me, 68 years old, retired school librarian, widow of 22 years, and apparently still the person whose name goes on bills that other people run up. I set the envelope on the table and put the kettle on. I wasn't ready to open it yet. I needed my tea first. I should tell you something about my house. I've lived here in Plano, Texas for 31 years. My husband Gerald and I bought it the year our son was born. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard with a pecan tree. Gerald planted himself, and a kitchen window that looks out over the neighbour's rose garden. When Gerald died of a heart attack at 53, I thought about selling it. Too much space for one person, people told me. Too many memories. I didn't sell it. I refinished the floors instead. Kept every room. Told myself I was keeping space for the future. That was the first mistake I didn't know I was making. My son Daniel moved back in 3 years ago. He was 41 then. Newly married to a woman named Courtney, and they had a little girl named Sophie who was 4 and smelled like strawberry shampoo and used to fall asleep in my lap during Sunday afternoon movies. I said yes before he finished asking. Of course, this house had always been his home too. There was room. There was more than room. Just until we get on our feet, Daniel said. I remember exactly how he said it, standing in my kitchen, hands in his pockets, looking a little embarrassed in that way men do when they're asking for something they know they should be able to handle themselves. I told him not to be silly. Family helps family. Gerald would have said the same thing. What I didn't understand then was that Courtney had a very specific definition of on their feet, and it wasn't the one I was picturing. The first year was fine mostly. Better than fine, honestly. Better than fine, honestly. Having Sophie in the house again made everything feel warmer. I'd come downstairs in the morning and find her little sneakers by the front door, her drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, her cereal bowl in the drying rack. Daniel cooked dinner twice a week and always cleaned up after himself. Courtney was quieter, more reserved, but I didn't read much into that. I'm not everyone's type of person. I've made my peace with that. But somewhere around month 14, things started to shift in ways I couldn't quite name yet. It started small. Daniel asked if he could add himself to my cell phone plan, just temporarily. Ours ran out and it's cheaper this way. Then Courtney's car registration was coming due, and could I spot them until Friday? They'd pay me back. Then the internet bill, then groceries for a week because payday was delayed. Friday came and went. Nobody mentioned paying me back. I didn't bring it up either. I told myself it was family. You don't keep score with family. But I noticed every time. The thing about being a librarian for 35 years is that you get very good at tracking things. Systems. Patterns. I kept a small notebook in the nightstand drawer, not to be petty. I genuinely wasn't sure yet if something was wrong, or if I was just being the difficult old woman Courtney sometimes looked at me like I was. By the end of the second year, I had filled 11 pages. I want to tell you about my birthday. I turned 68 in September. It was a Tuesday. Sophie made me a card at school, a piece of folded construction paper with a lopsided cake drawn in yellow crayon, and the words, "Happy Birthday, Grandma Ellie," in big uneven letters that made my chest ache with love. She handed it to me before school and said, "I made it myself. Did you see the candles?" I counted them. There were 9. I told her that was exactly right. 9 was my favourite number. That night, Daniel ordered pizza. Courtney came downstairs in athleisure clothes and sat at the table looking at her phone while Sophie and I played Go Fish on the living room rug. There was no cake. No card from either of them. Not even a verbal happy birthday from Courtney until Sophie reminded her. loud and clear in that way. 6-year-olds have no filter. "Mummy, it's Grandma Ellie's birthday." And Courtney looked up from her phone and said, "Oh right, happy birthday, Eleanor," and went back to scrolling. I smiled. I said thank you. I helped Sophie win 2 rounds of Go Fish, and I told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep and Daniel had gone up too, I sat at my kitchen table with a slice of leftover pizza and my own cup of tea, and I thought about Gerald's 50th birthday. I had thrown him a surprise party, 26 people in this very house, streamers in the backyard, a carrot cake I baked from scratch because it was his favourite, his mother crying happy tears by the pecan tree. He looked at me across the room that night and mouthed, "I love you," and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I thought about that for a long time. Then I went to bed. 2 days later, I checked my credit card statement online. I checked it every few days out of habit. Gerald had always said, a woman who knows her own finances never gets caught off guard. He was right, as it turned out. There was a charge I didn't recognize, Bloomingdale's, $412. I went back through the previous month. A charge from Sephora I didn't remember. A restaurant I'd never been to. An online order from a home goods store, $287. And the month before that, a charge from a local spa I'd heard Courtney mention once, $165. I sat very still at my kitchen table. I thought about the cell phone plan, the car registration, the groceries, the 11 pages in my notebook, and then I thought about something Daniel had asked me 8 months ago, very casually, while I was washing dishes. He'd asked if he could add Courtney to my credit card as an authorized user, just so she had access to funds in case of an emergency while he was traveling for work. I'd said yes. He'd said he'd handle the paperwork. I had forgotten about it entirely. I had not thought about it once since then. That was the night I stopped sleeping well. I didn't say anything right away. That might surprise you. People expect that the moment you discover something like this, you confront it immediately. Voices raised, tears, someone storming out. But I'm 68 years old, and I've learned that the worst decisions I've ever made in my life were the ones I made while I was still angry. So I waited. I checked 3 more months of statements. I found 2,847 charges I had not authorized and could not account for. Some were small. A coffee shop, a grocery run that was twice what I'd normally spend, an iTunes charge. Some were not small at all. There was a charge from a travel site. Flights. Round trip. 2 passengers to Scottsdale, Arizona. I remembered that trip. Courtney had told me she was taking Sophie to visit her college roommate for a long weekend. I'd waved them off at the door. Sophie had pressed her small hand to the car window as they backed out of the driveway, and I'd waved until they were out of sight. I had paid for that trip. I just hadn't known it. I went to my bedroom closet and got down the accordion file I keep on the top shelf, 31 years of household documents, organized by year and category, the way Gerald taught me. I pulled out every statement I'd kept, going back 18 months. I got out a yellow legal pad. I sat at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a pen. I added everything up. When I was done, I set my pen down and looked at the number for a long time. $11,422. I made myself a fresh cup of tea. I went and sat in Gerald's old armchair by the window and looked out at the pecan tree in the backyard. One of the branches had grown crooked over the years, reaching sideways instead of up, and Gerald always said he was going to trim it and never did. I was glad now that he hadn't. It was still reaching, still growing, just sideways. I thought about what it means to teach children. I had spent 35 years watching children learn how to reach for things. The good ones, the ones who really grew, they didn't reach because someone made it easy. They reached because they had to stretch. I thought about what I had made easy for 3 years. Then I got up, found my phone, and called my friend Patricia. Patricia Okafor has been my closest friend since 1987, when we both knew teachers at the same middle school and ended up eating lunch together every day for 8 years, until she moved to a different district. She is sharp and practical, and she has never once told me what I wanted to hear when what I needed to hear was something else. I love her for it. I always have. I told her everything. All of it, the statements, the flights, the birthday, the 11 pages. Patricia was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "Ellie, you need to call a lawyer. Not tomorrow, this week." "It's family," I said. I still said it then. "I know it's family," she said. "That's why you need the lawyer." I called Thomas Aldridge the next morning. He'd done our estate paperwork when Gerald died, and he'd always been straightforward and fair, the kind of man who explains things clearly without making you feel small. His office is downtown, the kind of place with good solid furniture and no unnecessary decoration. I've always trusted people who don't over-decorate. I brought the legal pad. I brought the statements. I brought the notebook from my nightstand. Thomas looked at everything carefully. He asked clear questions. He explained my options without alarm or drama. When he was done talking, I asked him one question. "Can they contest the house?" He said that depended on how things were arranged. He said we should make some arrangements. I left his office with 3 things: an appointment with my bank the following morning, a new document in progress for my estate, and something I hadn't had in weeks: clarity. That evening I made pot roast. I set the table, filled Sophie's cup with apple juice, and listened to her tell me in great detail about a disagreement she'd had at recess with a girl named Mattison over the rules of a jump rope game. I gave her my full attention. Her little face was so serious, so certain about what was fair and what wasn't. Children always know. It's remarkable, really, how clearly they see fairness before the world teaches them to look away from it. After dinner, Courtney took Sophie upstairs for bath time. Daniel stayed at the table with his phone. I'd poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat across from him. "How are things going at work?" I asked. "Good," he said, still looking at his phone. "Busy. The project in Austin still keeping you on the road?" "Yeah, some." He set the phone down then, looked at me a little. "Why?" "Just asking," I said. "I didn't see much of you during the week." He nodded, a little vague, the way people do when they feel the shape of a conversation without knowing yet what it's about. I finished my coffee. I told him I was tired and going to bed early. He said good night. I said good night back. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I was dressed and out of the house by 7:15 the next morning. The bank was nearly empty that early. My branch manager's name is Denise. I've known her for 12 years, since before she was manager, since she was the young woman at the third window who always remembered my name. She took me back to her office with a cup of coffee and closed the door. I told her what I needed. She pulled up the account. She confirmed what I'd found. "I'd like to remove all authorized users from both the credit card and the checking account," I said. "Today, if possible." "Absolutely," she said. No hesitation. No hesitation. No hesitation. No questions I didn't want to answer. Just yes, and the sound of a keyboard, and the quiet, efficient click of things being put back in order. I also transferred a portion of savings to the account I'd kept in my own name only, the one Gerald had insisted I maintain separately and that I'd never touched. He'd said a long time ago that every woman should have money that is only hers, not because marriage isn't trust, but because life is long and things change, and you should never be in a position where you have nothing to fall back on. I'd thought he was being old-fashioned at the time. I thought about him then, in Denise's office, watching her type. I thought about how he was almost never wrong about the things that mattered. By 8:30, I was back in my car. I sat in the parking lot for a moment with the engine off. The morning was cool, and the sky had that particular pale blue that September does in Texas. Not quite summer anymore, not yet fall, just clear, just still. I drove home the long way, past the middle school where Patricia and I had taught, past the library branch where I'd spent my best working years, past the little Vietnamese restaurant on Commerce where Gerald and I used to go on Friday nights when Daniel was at his grandmother's and we had the evening to ourselves. I hadn't been back there in years. I made a note to take Patricia sometime. Courtney tried to use the credit card for the first time 2 days later. I was in the backyard raking pecan leaves when I heard her voice from inside. I couldn't make out the words exactly, but I heard the tone. That particular pitch of confusion that slides quickly into irritation. A door opened and closed. Footsteps. Then Daniel was at the back door. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" I leaned the rake against the tree. I dusted off my gloves. We sat at the kitchen table. Courtney stood near the counter with her arms crossed. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He's always hated conflict. Even when he was a little boy, he'd rather smooth things over than examine them, and I've spent 30 years not knowing whether to call that a virtue or a flaw. "Courtney's card isn't working," he said. "Which card?" I said. "The one on your account. The Visa." "Oh," I said. "Yes, I had that removed." Silence. "You, what?" Courtney's voice was careful in a way that told me she was working to keep it even. "I reviewed my accounts," I said. "I found some charges I wasn't aware of. I thought it was cleaner for everyone if I simplified things." "What charges?" Daniel said. His voice was different now. Something behind his eyes that I recognized. Not quite guilt, not yet. Something closer to the thing that comes just before guilt, when you're still deciding whether you have to feel it. "Bloomingdale's," I said. "Sephora, the spa on Preston Road, the flights to Scottsdale." Nobody said anything. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a cardinal landed on the bird feeder I keep by the window and sat there a moment, bright red against the morning, then flew. "Mom, those were just... Courtney needed things and I told her it was okay to... Did you?" I said. He stopped. "Did you tell me she was going to do that?" I said. Not loud, not hard, just clear. He looked down at the table. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "It was $11,000, Daniel." The number sat between us like something physical. Courtney's arms were still crossed. She had a look on her face that I recognized too. I'd seen it in 35 years of working with children who'd been caught in something they thought they could get away with. Not remorse, calculation. "We were going to pay you back," she said. "When?" I said. She didn't answer. I looked at my son. He had his father's eyes, Gerald's exact grey-green eyes. And it was such a particular kind of grief to look at them in that moment. I had raised him to know better. I had raised him in a house where we talked about money as a responsibility, where we paid what we owed, where we said thank you and meant it. I didn't know what had happened between the boy I'd raised and the man sitting at my table, not quite meeting my eyes. "I love you," I said. "That's not something that changes, but this is my home. My name is on these accounts. I worked 40 years for what I have, and I don't intend to spend my retirement not knowing where my money goes." Courtney started to say something. I held up my hand, not dramatically, just the quiet way a teacher does when she's not finished speaking. "I've also spoken to my attorney," I said. "I'm updating some of the paperwork I've had in place. It's just good housekeeping, but I thought you should know." Courtney's expression changed then. That's when I saw that she understood. Not everything, but enough. Daniel looked up. His voice was quieter now. "Mom, you don't need to do all that." "I know I don't need to," I said. "I'm choosing to. There's a difference." I stood up, picked up my coffee cup, and went to rinse it at the sink. The conversation was done. I'd said everything I planned to say. Not angry, not tearful, just clear. I looked out the window at the rose garden while the water ran. Everything was where it was supposed to be. Things were uncomfortable for a few weeks. There was a coldness in the house. The specific cold that comes when something unsaid has finally been said, and everyone is recalibrating around it. Courtney was careful around me in a way she'd never bothered to be before. Daniel was quieter than usual. But something else happened too, something I hadn't expected. About 10 days after that kitchen conversation, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door in the evening. Sophie was already asleep. He came in and sat in the chair by the window, the same chair I'd sat in the night. I added up all the numbers on my legal pad, and he looked out at the backyard for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, "I knew, Mom." I let that sit. "Not all of it," he said, "but I knew some of it." I told myself it wasn't that much. I told myself he wouldn't mind. He shook his head. I told myself a lot of things. "Why?" I said. He was quiet for a while. "It was easier," he finally said. "Courtney's hard to say no to, and I didn't want to. I thought if I kept things smooth, if everything was easy, it would be fine." He looked at me then. "I forgot that easy for us wasn't easy for you." We talked for a long time that night. We talked about Gerald. We talked about what it meant that he'd grown up watching his father treat me with care, and how somewhere along the way he'd let himself forget that. We talked about what the next year needed to look like, a real timeline, a real plan, money changing hands in ways everyone agreed to out loud. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were things I said that were hard to say and hard to hear, but it was honest. Real conversation usually is. When he left, I sat by the window in the dark for a while. The pecan tree was just a shape against the night sky. That crooked branch reaching sideways the way it always had. Still growing, just not in a straight line. Courtney and Daniel found an apartment in December. A 2-bedroom in Frisco, about 20 minutes away. On moving day, I helped Sophie bubble wrap her collection of small plastic horses and label the box with her in purple marker. She was solemn about it in the way children are when they sense that something real is changing, when they're not sure yet whether to be sad. "Will I still come over?" she asked me. "Every Sunday," I said, "if you want to." She thought about this. "Can we watch movies?" "Anyone you pick." She decided this was acceptable. They pulled out of the driveway on a cold December morning. The truck loaded, Sophie waving from the back seat of the car, until they turned the corner. I stood on the porch until the street was empty. Then I went inside. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for 3 years. Not lonely. Just mine again. I put on the kettle. I looked around at the kitchen, at the drawings Sophie had left behind on the refrigerator, at the empty drying rack, at the morning light on the tile floor. I felt the space settle around me like something returning. I thought about Gerald, the way I always do. About all the things he told me before he was gone. About the account he'd insisted I keep in my own name. About how he used to say that self-respect wasn't about what you demanded from other people. It was about what you allowed. I had allowed a lot. That was true. I'd opened the door wide and told myself that was love, that giving without limit was the same as loving without limit. But I understood now that it isn't. Love asks something of the people who receive it. It doesn't hand everything over with no questions asked and call that generosity. That's not love. That's just fear of the conversation you know you need to have. I poured the tea. I opened the kitchen window a little. The December air came in, cool and clean. Sophie comes every Sunday. She always picks an animated movie I've already seen 100 times, and I watch it again like it's new. Courtney and I are not warm, but we are civil. And Daniel calls me most evenings on his way home from work, just to talk. Small things. What he had for lunch. Whether it's going to rain, things that aren't about anything except wanting to stay connected. I still have my legal pad. I still have my meetings with Thomas. I still have my account in my own name. I still rake the pecan leaves every fall and think about Gerald and that crooked branch. And at 68 years old, I have finally learned the thing I should have learned much earlier, that a door with no lock isn't generosity. It's just an open door. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you love is to show them, clearly and without cruelty, exactly where the threshold is. I know where mine is now, and I am not moving it. I used to think that generosity was measured by how much you gave without being asked, that the quieter you were about your own needs, the more you proved you loved someone. I believed that for a long time, longer than I should have. What I know now is that I was confusing love with erasure. I was making myself smaller and calling it grace. There's a version of what happened in my house that I could tell where I'm only a victim, where Daniel failed me, where Courtney took advantage, where I was just a kind old woman who got used up. And some of that is true. But not all of it, because I was the one who handed over the card. I was the one who said yes without asking questions. I was the one who sat at my own birthday table, ate pizza off a paper plate while nobody sang, and told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine, I just didn't have the courage yet to say so out loud. That's the part nobody talks about. The way we train people how to treat us, not with one big decision, but with 100 small silences. Every time I didn't bring up the money they owed me, I was teaching them that I wouldn't. Every time I swallowed the hurt and smiled, I was showing them the hurt didn't count. I thought I was keeping the peace. I was actually just postponing a reckoning that was always going to come. What changed everything wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't some moment where I finally snapped. It was something quieter and more durable than anger. It was clarity. The night I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and added up $11,422, I didn't feel rage. I felt something settle in me, like a door closing on a draft. I saw exactly what had happened. And once you see something that clearly, you can't unsee it. Wisdom isn't what you know when things are going well. It's what you're willing to face when they're not. I had to face that I had made it easy for people I loved to become people I didn't recognize. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with. But sitting with it honestly was the only way through. And resilience. I think people imagine resilience as toughness, as not breaking. But what I felt in Denise's office that morning, watching her remove those authorized users one by one, wasn't toughness. It was something more like returning to myself. Like remembering that my name on those accounts meant something, that I had worked 40 years for what I had, that Gerald had been right about the separate account, about knowing your own numbers, about never being in a position where you have nothing to fall back on. Sophie still comes every Sunday. She still picks the movie. She still falls asleep sometimes before it ends, curled up on the couch with a blanket I've had since she was born. And Daniel calls most evenings, just to talk, just to stay in reach of each other. We're rebuilding something. Slowly, honestly, without pretending the last 3 years didn't happen. I still rake the pecan leaves every fall. I still think about Gerald and that crooked branch reaching sideways. Still growing, just not the way you'd expect. That's enough. That has always been enough.